Okay, so now we're recording. Good evening, Nicci St George Smith.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
From my kitchen to your kitchen, I see.
No, I'm in the office of the National Reptile Zoo in Kilkenny City. Hang on, here we go. See, National Reptile Zoo.
You're joking me.
Yeah, we're filming with them, so there's nobody here. It's after hours, so we're here in the canteen, so to speak. So yeah.
Did you know we had a National Reptile Zoo?
Yeah, it's amazing. So they were in Goran, which you would know from the race course, and it was started by a guy called James Hennessy, and he is a herpetologist. So that's his whole area of expertise. But he's, you know, multifaceted and all of that. But so he opened up this incredible facility in Goran, and yeah, numbers have grown and justified a move into Kilkenny City. And, you know, it's so annoying with the COVID thing. There's so many people who started new businesses, but he built this new zoo from basically from a shell, and hosted this huge conference last year. Numbers are up, you know, officially opened at Christmas time. And then the COVID thing kicked in, so he had to close. But listen, huge interest. You can find them online, and you know, people are doing virtual tours of the place, and they'll open up again. And everything is great, but it's a great facility. So
very good. I did not know that now. So anyway, I'm going to come back to you. So just to go back to your very beginning, I mean, I know you a few years now, and just you obviously have am I right in thinking you have an English background? You're originally
no, my dad's family would have been British Scottish, so that's where the name comes from. But they
very
would have been. Well, when I was younger, I just used Smith because I went to school in Kilkenny, and I don't know how well the St George, the double barrel, wouldn't have done too well. But no, my grandparents, Henry and Jennifer, lived at Piperstown in Drogheda, and you know, I would have grown up there, lived there for years as a child. So when I left school and was working in England, you know, what's on your passport is how you're addressed. So I went, you know, officially your full name. So once I was sort of in the workplace, I was reclaiming my full name. So, and I'm quite proud of it. You know, Gran and Grandad have both passed on, and I really like to, you know, to keep that, you know, in their memory. So if I were a son, you know, if I had been a grandson, I would have been passing it on, but I won't be able to do that.
So you went to college where in?
Yeah, so I mean, I went to school in Kilkenny, and when I studied in St Patrick's, and I studied humanities, and then I travelled. I ended up doing my final year online. So I have a degree in theology, philosophy, and English. And then I was traveling. I was living in Poland and in the States and all over. And I went and did further studies. So media was always the draw. So
yes, I saw somewhere, did I see on LinkedIn or something you'd done psychology? Was that you?
Oh yeah. So I mean, that was like, obviously, I mean, I've told you about Dad. So that was always something that was there. So yeah, I mean, people.
Dad, Nicci, tell me the story about your dad.
Yeah, so you know, Dad would have been, you know, he was a gorgeous, you know, guy, and went to the best schools and all of that. You know, lovely guy, and I was joking about him having gone to school with Prince Andrew, but that's where the connection stops. But no, so he, you know, when he was sort of in his early 20s, he, you know, much like James actually from the National Reptile Zoo, a bit of an adventurer, and you know, he flew planes and all of that, but he unfortunately had a terrible accident. He was coming into land and hit some electric power lines, and you know, had a crash, and unfortunately you know, was really badly hurt. He sustained very serious injuries. He had frontal lobe damage, and so he was in a coma for 6 weeks. You know, he died in the ambulance on the way to hospital and all of that, and they revived him. And yeah, so he it's strange talking.
Was he the only one in the plane at the time?
Yeah, he was. I mean, luckily, and obviously where it happened, it was in a field, open field, so nobody else was affected physically. Anyway, you know. But yeah, so when he was in a coma for 6 weeks, and when he came to, because of the brain injury, he was just, you know, a completely different person. And so he went from being this sort of beautiful gentleman, really, and you know, just a different human being, and you know, very angry, and you know, violent person. So it was hard, you know. We stayed in you know, sort of trying to, you know, work with my mum. You know, I was only 2.5 at the time, but my mum, you know, she really tried her best to sort of work, you know, with what was what we could, and you know, support him and everything. But he just wasn't getting better. He was getting more and more frustrated, and you know, it was very difficult. And there's only so long that you can stay in a violent situation. And so, yeah, you know, we ended up moving to, you know, staying in Piperstown for the year while he went and had further sort of rehabilitation at a hospital. And it was the early 80s, so people didn't know what they know now. I mean, in some respects, he and many of his you know, sort of the other residents in the hospital would have been the canaries in the coal mine. You know, we know a whole lot more about brain injury, acquired brain injury, than we did then. But it was very difficult. Even, I mean, for Mum, like, she was only sort of 24, I think, at the time, and you know, the world was, you know, you know, their whole lives were ahead of them, and you know, the love of her life, you know, ended up, you know,
being a different person.
Yeah, so he's walking around, but there's a different person inside. So it was very, very difficult. But I sort of grew up, you know, knowing these terms very young, you know, frontal lobe damage and personality change, and, you know, about different psychological terms. So there was always that interest, because I was looking for answers as you get older. So the draw was naturally there in college to go and study that. So I enjoyed it. I'd like to go and do further study. I did train as a bereavement support worker, bereavement counsellor, and I enjoyed the work. But I found it quite taxing in that it's hard to leave your work in the office. You know, you do where you get involved. It's hard not to get involved. So, you know.
And you're such a people person.
Yeah, I think so. I think then as you get older, you do realize that you have to keep a little bit back for yourself. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. And I've learned that, I guess, the hard way, I suppose. But
yes. And actually, I saw you having I won't say a rant, because you're not really a rant type at all, but the Johnny Depp situation, and maybe that's why it triggered it with you, with your dad.
Yeah,
just violent situation that Johnny Depp was in. So what are your thoughts on the whole thing? I mean, the whole situation is so unbelievably bizarre. I mean, money, wealth, celebrity, drugs, throw it all.
I mean, to be honest with you, a couple of years ago, many years ago, I made a decision sort of not to really read tabloids or buy those magazines or anything like that. But every so often there'll be something that trickles down from you know, popular media, and you know, that will affect us, you know, and that will trigger something, you know, personal. And so for me, I think because of the situation we went through with Dad, I'm always suspicious when people make claims such as this woman has done. But I think there are certain things that people do when they've really gone through a trauma like that. And I know everybody's different, obviously, but I think things like if you've been through something like abuse, or, you know, violence, or any kind of abuse, I don't mean physical abuse, but anything at all. It's very unusual that somebody would, before they would call the police, that they would address the world through social media, or they would. I understand that, you know, these kinds of people, you know, their public profile, you know, they live and die by them. But I think the sincerity of something like that can be seen through the dignity through which somebody handles the situation. I just think there's so many aspects to that story. Like we've come a really long way. You know, the whole idea of believe women, like, that's really important. Because you say something like what's happened to Mum, had you know, it been a situation where people just didn't believe this kind of thing, that would have been horrendous. But I think through trying to do good, you can almost go too far to the detriment of men, you know, and men are abused too. And yes, women can lie and men can lie, but this thing of just believing people without sort of looking into the facts, I think that sort of gets us into a whole lot of trouble. And then you can be, you know, sort of this word gaslighting, you know, this is a big phenomenon. And you know, I normally don't pay any attention to these stories.
Like, he's quite happy to say all the terrible things he did, but he's also happy to say, here's the things I didn't do.
Right.
But I mean, there's a complete insane situation there, Nicci, isn't there? Like, it's a toxic blend. The whole thing is just an explosion, a mess, isn't it? Like,
yeah, I mean, people have so much money. I can imagine you can do anything, you can be anything, you can have anything.
Yeah.
And I think boundaries, you know, are fairly skewed, I think, when that's the situation. I mean, we, you know, like so many actors, people like Johnny Depp, now they're so beautiful. They've been in these roles that have affected us deeply, and we feel a sense of, I guess, love for them in a way, even though we don't know them. So you want it to be true that he's not the villain. But there are so many people coming forward to sort of corroborate this, and there are so many things that she has said that are very strange, that you do have to ask the question. And I do think it, again, when news of these kinds of things break, the idea to just believe without knowing the details. There's something, I'm not a huge Cliff Richard fan, but do you remember all those accusations and what he went through? And the press were all over it, and then it turned out that none of them were, all of these allegations were not true, but he went through the poison of it, you know, and had to take it. It was just so awful. So I think we do need to look at how we, you know, the press does have a responsibility, and I think it's really great that he stood up for himself, and more people should do that. Because it's very difficult when you were painted as the villain to get the courage to stand up for yourself, and we should do that.
Yes, we should. But then the media then are to blame completely, because I mean the media went after, they destroyed Cliff Richard in front. I mean they're destroyed completely as people, you know, and that shouldn't be allowed to happen. Actually, I mean you should. You know, his life was completely ruined. You know.
No, it's horrible, and also somebody of his generation as well, who, you know, the rules were very different when he was starting out. This is a new world that we're into, especially like social media territory is absolutely terrifying at its worst.
Yes.
You know, I think I feel for people who are an older generation, especially when you haven't done anything wrong, you know, I mean, it's just horrendous, you know.
Yeah. So Nicci, tell me this, documentary making and all that, did all that happen since you, I'll come back to your obviously, I know you, and you had Lyme's, was it, am I right in thinking about 5 or 6 years ago it happened to you? Lyme's disease?
No, I got it in 2000, and my symptoms were sort of a slow ebb, and it sort of built up to 2015 where I just flatlined, basically. I just couldn't do anything. So it was a struggle for about, you know, for those years just to try and get to a point where I was fully well. So I had 2 years of, you know, just feeling great. So but a lot of years of feeling terrible, but let me tell you. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because since I met you, and we were talking about it, I was listening to, I'm quite sure you heard the Joe Duffy thing there about 6 months ago. One day somebody rang in with this funny disease called Lyme's, and Joe was saying something like, well, only 100 people in Ireland this year have registered with Lyme's, and weirdly, I think something like 2,000 or 3,000 people rang the Joe Duffy show to say that they had symptoms. Now, I know if you would tell us, please, about your symptoms, because it's such a mad disease that you literally can have anything. And I've watched YouTube clips on it because Patricia, a friend of both yours and mine, and obviously a great friend of mine and a great friend of our charities, Patricia has it. And so we've been through we've looked at the YouTube clips, we've done all that. Just talk to me about how, first of all, explain what it is for people who don't know, because it's incredible when you do hear about it, the amount of people that actually do have it.
Yeah, so it is really common, and it's been around for centuries. And so basically, it's passed predominantly through tick bites, and ticks are these tiny little insects that are about the size of a poppy seed, but they, you know, they carry bacteria basically. So because they feed on all sorts of things. So they feed on birds, mice, every animal possible. You know, deer predominantly do also have a huge amount of ticks on them when they're up in sort of highlands or hills and things. And so, you know, if you can imagine, they're sort of, you know, they're feeding on these animals that have had thousands of other ticks feed on them, and they're transferring, like with mosquitoes, they're transferring different bacteria. So when they bite a human, they transfer these nasty bacteria into the human. But they're so clever how they've evolved over time. So when they bite you, they actually release a kind of anesthetic-like substance. So you don't actually feel the bite, and you don't know that you have anything attached to you. So they latch on, and they, you know, suck on the skin of the host, and they drink your blood basically, which is, they feed on that, and then they sort of fatten up, and they, you know, fall over. You know, they lay thousands of eggs, and it's really disgusting, and then the whole process just starts all over again. So basically, over thousands and thousands of years, this Borrelia burgdorferi bacteria and some other bacteria have been just circling the globe, and humans have been, you know, when you get bitten, you obviously become the vector as well. So we're passing them on, and all of that, we're passing the bacteria on. Now, the thing to combat this is a really strong immune system. So if you think of how we've evolved and how our society's evolved. You know, we don't eat as good as we did. We don't eat fresh food. You know, our gut biome is attacked by all of these different chemicals and toxins that we're taking in, and all the preservatives. So we need to strengthen our immune system and boost our gut health, which means that we can stave off these bacteria. So actually, many of us, you might even have this bacteria in your body, but because your immune system is very strong, you're able to keep the thing at bay. So what happens is, if you're, you know, maybe you get a, you know, some kind of virus or a sickness of some kind, or maybe you have a shock or a bereavement, and your body goes into shock and your immune system is affected. The bacteria is pretty clever, so it knows that your immune system is weakened, and it sees an opportunity to gain dominance in the body, and that seems to be what happens. So things like a vaccination, you know, like I said, shock to the system, all of these things can trigger suddenly the bacteria gaining dominance in the body. So with that, then your symptoms can include, literally, it runs the gamut of everything you can imagine. So you're talking about huge inflammation in the body, so cognitive impairment, gut issues, pain in the joints, fatigue. Like fatigue is the big one, and brain fog. So you can't think straight. So I can't remember, somebody said this, and I thought it summed it up really well, that when you have Lyme disease, it's not that you can't multitask, you actually can't multi-think. So you literally are you've got this much that you can sort of focus on. It's a little bit hazy, but any of this sort of peripheral vision, you just don't have it anymore. And you can't, say for instance, if you're talking to somebody and they're not being straight with you, you actually can't cope with that, because you can only entertain one sort of idea at a time. And so it's very difficult to you know, socialize, because people have, you know, different agendas. And even if you go to a store and you're trying to buy something, maybe somebody's trying to sell you something else. So it's quite difficult even to interact in a very simple way with people. Your hearing can be impaired, your vision can be impaired, often because of inflammation, your nerves are affected. So I would have, you know, experienced, you know, lack of feeling in my face and different things like that, and not from Botox or anything.
Did you know you had a bite?
Yeah, so I got bitten in 2000 when I was working in the States. I was a student on a J1 visa, and was out in the countryside upstate New York. Got bitten by a deer tick, went straight to the infirmary. I had that, you know, the typical mark that you get from the bite. Yeah. And went straight to the infirmary. They said, looks like Lyme disease, we'll take a blood test and here's some antibiotics anyway, you know. And then I got the results. They were positive, and she said to me, you know, just keep taking them and you'll be fine. And I forgot about it, and that was the end of it. But I actually continued to I didn't have a lot of symptoms straight away because I was very healthy. But after about 2 years, that's when things slowly started. So I had kidney issues, I had ovarian issues, the cognitive stuff. You see, I think, is it in Irish women? I'm not sure, all women, but we can take physical pain and we can put up with that. But it's when your thinking and your cognitive ability is affected, that is when you go, hang on here, that's really scary. And I couldn't keep track of things, and I couldn't remember things. I was always losing my keys, and, you know, all of the simple stuff. But it just got to a point where it got worse and worse. I'd been in a car accident, and I think the shock to my system, that was it. That was like, once that happened, I never recovered properly. And
you knew this was the Lyme's. You knew this was the Lyme.
I didn't. No, I didn't, because I didn't know. I didn't know that Lyme was such a big issue. Like, we don't hear about it here, or certainly I didn't hear about it growing up. And it wasn't until I got so sick and I was in bed for months that somebody suggested to me that it might be Lyme, because they knew I'd had it before.
Yeah.
And I Googled out of desperation, and like 10,000 you know, pages came up. So that's sort of where the whole thing actually really started for me, because I knew what I was dealing with, you know.
Okay. And so you weren't able to work. You were bedridden, am I right? You were actually bedridden.
I would say bedbound for like 4 months, but the 2 years around that were, I could have a good day, I could have 10 bad days, I could have a good week, I could have 4 bad months, you know. So you're not reliable, you can't work. I had to quit working. Like, I had to hand everything over to my partner, my business partner, and just sort of go, look, I don't know if I'll be coming back, but good luck. I'll see you if this ever ends, you know.
People that have things like, say, ME, could it be Lyme's that they have, and what's the testing process for it here in Ireland?
Yeah, first, your first question, it's quite possible. Like ME looks like it could be many things, but one of the things, it could be Lyme. Of course it could. And there are many co-infections that come with Lyme. There's lots of different types of bacteria. And sort of the Lyme that we've always had, which is just Borrelia burgdorferi, those Borrelia type bacteria, that's pretty standard. But it's this new thing, which is you get, you know, if you get one bite, you can get Borrelia, you can get Babesia, Bartonella, Anaplasmosis, like the list just goes on, you know. And that's where it's so complicated. So people can have all of these co-infections, and it makes treatment and diagnosis very difficult. We don't have a great testing system, but I would say this, because of COVID, the similarities are huge between the effects of it and it looks like the treatment. So you're talking about boosting your immune system and limiting toxic overload with the body. So if you're, like I said, if your immune system is strong, you've got a really great chance of withstanding, you know, something coming like a virus or a bacterial infection. I just read today that there's a doctor in the States who's been using a Lyme treatment for COVID sufferers. So, you know, because they're talking now about people who've had COVID and recovered, but they still have these lingering issues. And that's kind of what we experience, you know, as Lyme patients. It's not the, you know, the intense, like heavy sort of hardcore symptoms and the getting through it. It's the forever after. So it's trying to keep yourself well. And so also with testing, there are a few people laughing about this, but in a kind of dark way. But so what happens is we don't have a correct testing system here, but we have clinics abroad that test in other ways. And so they're more accurate. But when you come back to Ireland and you say, well, I've been to a particular clinic abroad and I've tested positive. And so can you treat me? They go, well, we don't recognize this clinic and we don't recognize this test. So you're left in this limbo. And you're talking about, you know, patients of all ages, maybe children who are, you know, they haven't had a chance to have any, you know, quality of life, and they're just left in this situation. So they don't qualify for medical assistance, or, you know, maybe their medical insurance doesn't cover it. You know, you can't see a doctor here because you got to go private and you can't afford it. It's awful. But anyway, with the COVID thing, I thought it was very, I guess, ironic, not funny, but with the testing system, they were willing to recognize people going outside of Ireland for a COVID test to these clinics. And when you came back, they would treat you. So I think it may help us a little.
Okay. And there it's funny because I remember you and maybe Trish talking about Dr. Lambert, and I saw him he was on the telly loads of times over the whole COVID time.
Right.
And that's obviously to do with the suppressed immune system and all that kind of stuff, is it?
Well, he is probably the best infectious disease specialist that we have in the country, and certainly the most willing to bridge the gap between old thinking and new thinking, I would say that. But at the same time, and he's a great doctor, you know, he's been a great ally. But for me, pharmaceutical medicine didn't work for me. And so I went down a herbal route. And so for me, it's quite difficult, you know, to kind of talk about that, him particularly in any great way, because he wasn't part of my experience of getting better. But he's a good man. And I actually think with regard to COVID, he's been a great person to have as a spokesperson and to have as a conduit there between, like I said, old thinking and new thinking. So,
Nicci, did you try the antibiotics first? When you were at your worst, did you try the antibiotics and then decide to go for the holistic, or how did that work?
Yeah, so I mean, my whole sort of situation was quite weird because I had a lot of kidney issues, and so I'd been taking huge amounts of antibiotics every year, 4 years. And it was this sort of suck it and see, we don't know what's wrong, but here, try these. And that's never any way to go about treating anything. You know, it's like throwing something at a window and hoping it'll stick or something, you know, or the wall or something. So yeah, by the time I realized 15 years later, after this stupid little tick bite, that all of these crazy symptoms I'd been having were potentially to do with Lyme. And I got retested and it was positive. I just thought, my God, I've been through hell with pharmaceutical medicine. Is there anything that works? And I couldn't actually find anybody who'd been cured 100% with no lingering symptoms at that time with pharmaceutical medicine. And the only people I was finding who were fully better and fully cured all had one thing in common, and that was herbal medicine. So I went down that route. And this amazing doctor, Armin Schwartzbach, I've talked about him many times, he said, look, obviously they're not going to work for you, so I'm going to recommend this thing called the Cowden protocol, and it's a herbal protocol, and it's made with a company, by a company called NutriMedics. And he said, look, I'm going to gift you the first 3 months and see what you think. And you know what, long story short, it was really tedious and taxing trying to go through it's kind of arduous kind of
I saw the amount of bottles of like herbal stuff. My God, it's huge. I don't even know how you'd get through it in a day, but it's.
Well, you're so desperate, Debbie, just to get better, just to get better. And you do anything. And it was very difficult because cognitively I couldn't, it was hard. It was very hard. It was very difficult. Speaking, I could not have spoken to you. It was very difficult. So you do anything, but it's like a heavy duty protocol of antivirals, antimicrobials and antifungals, and then trying to detox. Now, it is a detox as in the kind of fad diet way, but actually really pulling toxins out of the body. And so I would say all in, 9 months, just because I at 7, I thought I was better, but I had to continue. And then I went on a maintenance dose and I was really back in the room. And like I went through a period of time, this is like, if you could sort of map this out, I went from when my symptoms got worse and I didn't know what was happening, I had a heightened sense of empathy, like crazy, right? And then it sort of dissipated. I came back to normal. And then I went into a point where I literally had no feeling. And I remember, this is crazy because I was out on 8 trucks going to Eastern Europe to orphanages. And I love these kids. And suddenly I can't feel anything. It's crazy. And so I'm Googling, is it possible for an adult to develop autism? And I'm thinking, what the hell's wrong with me? Like I couldn't be more feeling, and yet I can't access my emotions. So this is all part of it, because you're so swollen, you've got such inflammation in your body, your gut, your brain, everything, and your emotional self. Like there's nothing there. You can, like if somebody dies, it's sad, so you'll respond appropriately. But in your heart and your feeling, you can't access your emotions. It's very scary. And so with this protocol, there was a point where it's so strange, and I've talked about this before, but I was able to go back driving because I had very slow, response to things. So like I could be at a red light, but I was sort of slow with my responses. So I couldn't drive. I was afraid. And I had been on the protocol long enough where I could go back to drive. And I noticed I'd actually turned on the radio and because I couldn't stand noise. I couldn't take noise, bright lights, dark, anything, just everything hurt, And I noticed I turned on the light, and I don't love this song terribly, but Roberta Flack was on Killing Me Softly. And I could feel it and I could hear the music, and also the sentiment of it really affected me. And I started crying, but I was crying because I could feel it. You know what I mean? So I'm like driving down the road, crying to Roberta Flack. I just like this, like a mad person. But I was just so delighted that I could feel. So I knew it was working. And then since then I haven't looked back, and I'm here. So.
Now, since then, you've gone on to do incredible things for the whole Lyme problem. I mean, the conference that happened, is it 2 years ago you started this? The first time it was ever in Ireland?
No, there's a few. There was one that happened before I knew what was going on. To me, we'll say that it was Lyme. So the patients did get together. I think Jenny O'D or somebody ran that. That was in Dalkey or somewhere. And they got some really great doctors. Now, the emphasis of that was more herbalism at the time, which is amazing. And then there was a break for a bit. And then a couple of patients got together and decided to run one in, I think it's 16 and then 17. And then a bigger group got together for 18. But I finally kind of got the courage last year to organize, along with the TikTok Ireland, which is a support group, their main conference. And they're amazing, by the way. So actually anybody watching this, TikTok Ireland, that's where you need to go, because there's such a huge, like so many resources and a big net of, all types of practitioners. They have all of the contacts and everything, and support, that's a big one. But I got great support to do a conference relating to sort of herbal medicine and herbal treatment, and then gut health and nutrition. So Connor Saunders, he is literally the gut guy. He spoke, and we had doctors from all over the world come and speak, and it was great, and for me it was kind of full circle, because these are the things that worked for me, and I think they're definitely worth trying, especially, it mightn't be Lyme, but it might be something else, and we're we're sort of overloaded with toxins and the unnatural. And I think with these things, what they do is they support your body to help yourself. So the conferences have been brilliant because you meet lots of like-minded people. The doctors are really open to it because they want to see a new model take shape. They don't want to be filling out prescription pads, and that's kind of what we do now. You know, we just sort of take a prescription, and you know, you got to do more than throw a pill at something, because humans are, you know, we're multifaceted and complicated, and we need a various amount of things to sort of keep us going and keep us healthy, you know.
Well, Nicci, you're the absolute picture of health. I mean, you're stunning for starters, but I mean, everything, your skin, your hair, you're always so, you just look like a picture of health. Are you vegetarian? Are you vegan?
I eat fish. I don't eat any meat. I don't eat meat for ethical reasons. But I do, like, I do eat a lot of fresh produce. I think that's very important. And I try to drink as much water as possible. Like the gut health, I can't stress this enough. I take probiotics every day. I take a thing called Probio 7, that really was the game changer for me. So even though I was taking that particular protocol, it wasn't
counter, or is that a prescription? Or is it a counter? Can you buy it in Boots? Is there something you'd recommend?
You can buy it in Holland and Barrett. I know that. Maybe you can buy it in Boots as well. But for anybody who sees this in the States, I know that it's in what's the one, Whole Foods as well. So yeah, it's great. But it's, you know, I think Probio 7. Yeah. And so that's great, because when you get your gut right, and you'll notice if any probiotic that you take, when you get to a point where, you know, things start to move again, you have such clarity. And I think a lot of us, I think we probably noticed with the lockdown how busy we were prior to it and how much pressure we were under. But when you get your gut right, the clarity that you have to think and to talk and everything, you know, to have a conversation, I was just a mess, you know. And it's funny because obviously with these kinds of things, you're trying to impart as much information as possible. I tend to sort of round them up. So I'm sorry about that, but it's been a long road to get to the point where you can impart what's happened to you, you know, to other people.
But congratulations. I mean, you've come out the other end of it and you look absolutely stunning, and hopefully it's never going to affect you again. Do you feel you're finished? That's it?
Like, I will do everything that I can do for myself. You know, I'm not going to risk anything. My friends have been amazing. Like, they're very supportive. So if I'm in a situation where there isn't an option food wise, they're very good about like going elsewhere to eat. So I don't eat any gluten. And I don't eat sugar. I would eat raw honey and things like that. So if I'm in a situation where I have to have a little bit of something, it's okay. But then I'll be very careful then for the days afterwards. But I don't eat any gluten, and I don't eat sugar if I can help it.
So you don't, like I said, I don't eat. Is this because sugar feeds the virus?
I mean, yeah, for a lot of reasons. Like, I know people don't like to talk about this because it's, you know, we're addicted to sugar. We are. It is like, you know, crack cocaine or something. And it's like, don't take everything you want, but don't take our sugar. And I mean, even I know patients, and many of whom have been sort of influential on me getting to get to a point where I got better. And you're talking to them and you're saying, you know, you're trading information, which you do all the time, because, you know, you're all trying to find out the best information. And they'll be talking to you eating biscuits, and they're going, yeah, and you don't eat sugar, yeah. And you're like, and they're like, oh, well, I eat sugar and I'm fine. But yet you'll meet them and they're not fine, they're sick. And they're sick because they're full of inflammation from sugar. So even if you don't have Lyme, cutting down sugar is important. Like, sugar, it sort of ages you. You know what I mean? If you know people who eat healthy, they have good skin and they have, you know, good health as well. So you can read it on their face. But sugar, it does feed the Lyme bacteria. And actually my treatment, it's a funny one. There's sort of a Trojan horse effect with the treatment. So I had the antivirals and the antifungals and antimicrobials that treated it, but you couldn't take those into the body and have it sort of kill the bacteria without a saccharide, without a sugar. So the sugar stevia, which people will know to naturally sweeten coffees and things, that was actually also administered as part of the treatment. So the bacteria recognizes this saccharide and thinks, oh, I'll ingest that, but actually it's loaded with antimicrobials and antivirals and it kills it from the inside. So it's like a Trojan horse effect, which is incredible. And Eva Sapi, if they want to Google Dr. Eva Sapi, she's a Hungarian working in the States. She's done amazing research on this, and she had Lyme. So she is, again, one of those conduits between the patient and the doctor world. So she's great. So sugar is not good for us, but if you have to have a sweetener, I would say raw honey, maybe raw, maple syrup. Stevia is good. I don't love it for sweetener, but yeah, those kinds of things. But if you can avoid sugar, absolutely.
Well, you're a good ad for it. Come back now to a bit of gossip. Prince Andrew and Ghislaine, tell us the story. Have you any insider information there, any from anywhere that we don't know? If they keep that woman alive for the next year, it'll be a miracle. Is all. I mean, really and truly.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, before we knew all of these issues, like, it was kind of funny, and I know we did joke about it because it sounded just like a bunch of, you know, elites off on their jollies with, you know, some beautiful young women. But as the story kind of emerged, you could see how sinister and really just dark the whole thing is. I watched the documentary on Netflix. Is it called Dirty Money or Filthy Money?
Yeah, Filthy
Money.
I think, yeah.
But the testimony of those women, I think, is just incredible as a woman. And, you know, like yourself, you know, going out on 8 trucks to somewhere like Eastern Europe, you're completely cut off, and how vulnerable you are in those situations. Can you imagine being a teenager? Like I had a lot of freedom as a kid. I traveled a lot, you know, and you're literally only as safe, you know, as the people, like the company that you keep, really. So you can come across these sinister characters. What they did was so disgusting and so terrifying, you know. But it's so strange, and I suppose there's a sexist element to this, because here's the thing: we look at somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, because he's a man, we go, oh yeah, big bad wolf, but we're so horrified when it's a woman.
Yes.
You know. And I have to really ask myself a lot of questions about that, because, you know, women are predators too, you know, and we shouldn't be afraid to talk about that.
Yes.
We need to talk about that, you know.
I mean, I don't think she's Oxford educated, and again, you don't think it's possible that, you know, you don't expect a paedophile like her to come from, you just don't expect that. The other thing that completely fascinated me was, maybe it's an arrogance thing. Why did she end up in a mansion in America? I mean, she'd a French passport. If she had a brain cell, why didn't she leg it to France, where nobody would have bothered with her? But she holed up in a mansion in the States where
this is the thing, there's obviously a level of confidence there where she feels she's protected. So that's the question. And also, is anybody talking to Alex Acosta as to why that crazy plea deal that took place down in Florida years ago, where she's supposed to be outside of the law basically with this issue? Like, it's incredible. And I think, like, I know we keep hearing these stories that, you know, that she's got the greatest, you know, maximum security or whatever, you know, and all of that. But I wonder, you know, really, how protected she is, and how, you know, like, will she disappear? Will she be killed? You know, this kind of thing. I mean, you're looking at it almost like cartoon-like way, but, you know, at the back of this is the life experience of these poor women whom, you know, you look at that beautiful woman, I'm so sorry I've forgotten her name, but that artist, and how she felt so responsible for her sister, you know, but she had there's no responsibility at her feet whatsoever, but she's still suffering so hugely. She talked about never having had children, and because of what happened to her, you know, it's just so frightening and so scary.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. No, it'll be fascinating to watch. I don't know how they're going to keep her protected for the next year, because I'd say even the women on the inside of the prison want to get at her. I mean, she's just a complete target. And the other thing
did you see the list of people that had been released, that had been on Jeffrey Epstein's plane that they were calling the Lolita Express, and the list of high-profile names? Well, one thing I thought was really, really interesting and kind of bizarre was, you know, how quick we are to gossip and to turn something into something else. But I don't know if you've been following the thing with Chrissy Teigen, because she and her husband, what's his name, John Legend, were apparently on some parties or something, and they took this plane to wherever they were going. And so this whole thing has erupted about her, you know, whether or not she's a paedophile. Now, I don't think Chrissy Teigen's a paedophile, but it's just bizarre the way things have erupted on social media. So I was watching a thread that, you know, somebody posted a comment about it, and I was looking how in real time you could see all the comments coming in, and within minutes, you know, how we kind of get into a frenzy and you know, kind of comment on things. But I think the problem is with social media, before people thought things in their head and they stayed there, but now they can put them out in the public. And
well, it'll be interesting to see whether she's going to sing names or whether she can do, you know, get years off her sentence because she's going to name people. I don't know whether it's Bill. I mean, they've said Bill Clinton was on the jet, Donald Trump was involved, but I mean, this is all hearsay at this point in time. You know.
Well, the Clinton thing is interesting because one of the workers in Little St. Bart's on that island actually has said that he saw Bill Clinton on the property, and he said that that woman, I forget her first name, but Giuffre is her surname. She's Roberts now. She's married, but she. He's a witness to having seen Bill Clinton on that property. So that's quite interesting. So it's not just, you know, but also. I think what's really interesting as well is, you know, if Ghislaine Maxwell gives the names of you know, some very famous people, she gets away with the crimes that she committed. And I think, given, you know, the testimony of those young women, I think that would be the worst thing that could happen. I think that she should suffer in some way for what she inflicted on those women. I think it's so incredible.
I don't think they'll let her away, because I think even at the end of the documentary, the judge very fairly, even though he had killed himself or was murdered or whatever, the judge allowed the girls all come in and give their own statements because he felt the girls needed to talk it out in a courtroom. And I think the girls were all very appreciative that the judge allowed them to do that, even though the perpetrator was dead at that point, you know. So I would say that the justice system now, it is totally corrupt, as you say, because when Epstein was charged with pedophilia in the first place from his beautiful Palm Beach mansion, he was going home every evening. He was leaving the jail every day and going home every evening in a chauffeur-driven limousine. I mean, do heads not roll for that? I don't understand how heads don't roll for that. Like, somebody was in charge of the prison that day and he was allowed out every night just because he was so wealthy, you know. But
he also flew into a different state as well for meetings, and he was seen at the hotel. So
yeah, no, I mean, it is very salacious, there's no doubt about it. And it is, at this point in time, I mean, it's terrible that in the middle of all this there's young girls, but there's no doubt we'll all be glued to the story, because it's the royals, it's money, it's their arrogance, it's Prince Andrew saying he never did it, he doesn't. I mean, his arrogance at that interview that time 6 months ago on the BBC, I mean, it was like as though it was all beneath him, you know, no apology, nothing. So
you know something, Debbie, it's funny, like, we would have grown up, because Dad was actually in school with Prince Andrew. Like, I don't know that they were close friends or anything, but they were, you know, they went to school at the same time, my uncle as well, and in Gordonston, and like, there is an element there of I'm not sure what it is, but it's sort of like pragmatism over emotional understanding and emotional intelligence. It's a very weird kind of thing, almost like they're slightly on the spectrum. That the kind of I'm not sure what it is. I don't know what it is. I never did understand it, but it's funny. I mean, obviously we've never met Prince Andrew or anything, but watching that that interview, and certainly anything else that he's done, there's a real sense of sort of being aloof and cut off from human emotion and understanding. And there seemed to be a real lack of empathy for the women, or for even, you know, if you were even to write a story, you'd have to have some kind of empathy for some of the characters, but there seems to be nothing there, you know, just sort of a cold, you know, just kind of, well, I've got to get myself out of this, you know, trouble, but other than that, you know.
But the royal way is that they would have been covered, they would have been screened from everything, they never would have got into trouble, everything would have been done for them. So they're totally removed from us plebs. I mean, they're totally removed. And you could see him even that night. I mean, it was like as though he was talking about, I don't know what, like the way I don't know, it was just like he wasn't talking about real people. It wasn't going to affect him at all. I just hope the Queen isn't around to see what's going to happen to him. If he is named, I'd hate poor old Queenie to see it happening, because I mean, he is her son at the end of the day, and you know, you'd hate to see that happening. But I'm quite sure
people are so protected, and there's a different law for them. So you know,
that's not right.
these people in high positions, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
there shouldn't be one law for one and
Yeah,
another law
I
for
don't think we'll ever
another,
see
you know.
Prince Andrew behind bars in an orange boiler suit, to be honest, Nicci. I just can't imagine it somehow ever happening, you know. It might happen the rest of us, but I don't think it'll happen Andrew, you know.
It's just, again, at the back of all of this is, you know, the women's story.
Yes.
You know, and I think that's the thing. And I do find myself making jokes about Prince Andrew all the time, and even Ghislaine Maxwell and all of that. But, you know,
Yes.
I can't forget these women. They're so, and the strength and courage it takes to even come forward, because you can see with them when they're talking that there's much more still going on. They haven't recovered, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that seeking justice is actually a huge part of their recovery, you know.
Yes. Oh, I agree with you. And I'd say some of them will never recover. And I'd say some of them, you know, already, I'd say some of them have never told their stories because they're just not able to deal with it. You know, the shame that they feel, you know, which is a terrible thing. A terrible thing, absolutely. Anyway, listen to me. It's just been gorgeous to talk to you. You're just a total breath of fresh air. And I'm thrilled to see you looking so absolutely amazing as always. Did you model in your lifetime? You're a model, were you?
A long time ago,
Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, you're stunning, but I mean, you're into much more in-depth stuff now with all your documentary making. Are you loving all that end of things?
I do. I mean, it's so funny even doing this, because I think this is the first time, normally I'm interviewing you, so it's so lovely to be, it's weird, but lovely to be on the other side of this. I hope that someone gives you a show, because you have so much, you have so much, no, but really, because I think we really need people, women like you. Sorry, I don't want to say women like you, because actually I think we need to get away from that men, women thing.
Yes.
We need people like you, whether they are male or female, it doesn't matter, but people who actually get up and make a difference, you know. And as you say, you always say it was an idea that started at the kitchen table, but one person can make a difference. So we need people like you. So I hope that this will grow legs, and I'm really honored to ask you
I was lucky enough to have Mary McAleese 2 weeks ago. And she is just formidable. I mean, she just every single sentence that comes out of her mouth, you want to write it down. You know, somebody that she's just an amazing person. And I said one of the things I did say to her was about female leaders, and she said exactly as you said. You know, she was scathing of Margaret Thatcher, and she's saying, well, look, Margaret Thatcher was a female leader, but she's not one that you would want to emulate or have in your country. And we were discussing someone like, say, Jacinda Ardern would ever been so fabulous. But Mary's point was that it's not whether you're female or not, it's whether you're a good leader or not. That's really what's important, you know, instead of all this business of female this and female that, you know. But no, I mean, your own radio show is are you still doing it?
I took a little bit of a bit of a break with the COVID thing, just because I was feeling, I think I'd taken on a little bit too much. So I had 3 projects on the go, and was kind of burning the candle at both ends. So I took a little bit of time to go back in, and I started on my herbal treatment again, just as a kind of a maintenance thing. And I was finding, like, I really care about, when I go to talk to somebody, I really care about their story, you know, and I want to be there and be present. So I found myself having too much going on, and I wasn't really present when I was doing the interview. So I took a bit of time, and then the COVID thing happened. So I had to, so I'm going back soon. But it's such a beautiful thing to share stories. And I've loved what you've been doing, but I remember the first time I interviewed you, and I don't know, had you just come back from having met Putin? I forgot. But
from Kremlin, I may be all right. I think maybe you were one of the first people I was talking to on the radio. All right, I was just in
okay. No, I think actually that was the second time we talked, because I think it was just before the fundraiser that you'd done at Clontarf Castle. So that was it. But the response to you was so beautiful. And I mean, I'm always going, like, obviously, you know, I have a different experience with different charities, but kind of similar, you know, but not starting them. I was joining, you know, writing tailcoats of others, but the experience was so beautiful. And so what I would say, you know, with you, why I think that you're more important than maybe another voice is that you're a real person and an easily accessible person, but the courage that's there is unusual. And I think we need more examples of that, male and female, but not the kind of, I don't mean this new sense of courage. It's very easy to sort of stand up and go look for attention on social media, but these quiet people who just get on and get the job done and do the heavy lifting, that's the kind of thing that we need, you know. And I just think this is such a beautiful thing, you know. And so I hope that you do. Hope that you can maybe get onto another platform where we get to see more of this, because it's so beautiful, and you're the right person to be, you know, the host for this, you know.
Thank you very much. Just one last thing I'm going to end on, Nicci, with you is because of, I know you've been through so much illness and all that, and then to go into COVID is a bit depressing, the whole thing. What is your, because you have obviously strengthened your own mind and your whole mindset is different to everybody else's because of what you've been through. What's your advice for people going forward? Because there's definitely a sense, well, I don't know whether it's just me, but like there's such a feeling of, I don't mean whoa, but there's so much negativity on the radio. There's so much worry about a second lockdown. There's so much, like our world is just slightly off kilter at the moment. And what is your, you know, what are your thoughts for everybody, or have you any advice for people having come through what you've been through yourself?
I don't know, like saying to other people, all I can say is just what I feel or what I have been kind of doing. But I would say, like, you know, early on, because of our experience with what happened to Dad, like that to me is like the worst thing that can happen, that you would lose, you know, your control of your mind, you know.
Yes.
So I think any day that you have clear cognitive ability and focus is a great day, where you get to make decisions and you know, you're present. That's a great day. And I would say that if we look at, like, just from, you know, from my feeling, like I tend to try and see the positive in things. And you know, with COVID particularly, obviously there's a worry there that if I got the thing, I would be at risk, you know, because of Lyme, and any of my friends who have Lyme, I would be terribly worried about them. But I sort of had to go, look, you know, what will be. I'll do the best I can to protect myself and keep myself well. And just speaking to Irish people only, I don't know about other places, but, you know, I've been on lockdown in Ireland, and this opening up is happening in Ireland for me. So I don't know about other places, but living here, we are so lucky. You think about the sense of community that we have, the camaraderie and the support that's there, even if you don't have it if you go outside your door, but you can go online and meet a community of like-minded people, or certainly people whose goal is to keep the community as well as possible. So obviously, yes, our medical, you know, the emergency staff at the hospital and all of our medical workers, but the community, like there's so many people checking in on each other, making sure people have everything, you know, if they haven't heard from somebody in a few days, checking in, that sense of community. And that's from an old way that we've had for centuries. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. So I think we have an awful lot to be positive about. And listen, I probably wouldn't have voted for Fine Gael, but I think they handled everything very well. And you think about, you know, even the payment that was given to everybody, okay, it wasn't maybe amazing, but it was much better than what it could have been. And I think they did do an amazing job. And it's hard for me to say that, maybe because Fine Gael haven't necessarily been Lyme disease awareness advocates in the way that maybe the opposition would have been. I think we have a whole lot to be really positive about. And this is probably the most important thing for me. We have great people, farmers producing, you know, organic produce, selling them at local markets in our local stores. Buy it, it's good for you, it's healthy, you know, you're supporting local business, you're supporting local farmers and families, and it's the best thing that you can eat to keep your immune system strong. And I would say, if you feel very negative and you're going online and you're going into an echo chamber where people are echoing that negativity, just stop. Try and find something else a little bit more positive for yourself, to reinforce, you know, not that you're sort of happy clappy, not being realistic,
yes,
but to support you. Like this is a really positive spin. No, I don't mean this as in me, but I mean what you were doing.
I know,
and the people you're talking to. That's really good for
positivity. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And don't worry, because here's the thing. We're going to get through this somehow. We are. And we have amazing people, we have amazing technology, we have amazing scientists, and we have amazing food here, which is a really big part of you know, building your immune system. So try not to worry, you know, try not to, and try and talk to positive people. And if you're religious, pray, or if you're not, meditate, whatever it is, but take time and try and find some peace, you know.
Okay, very good advice. Thank you very much. If you're in Dublin, book for coffee. It's been too long. It's been too long since we've had a human to human cup of coffee, Nicci. If I'm in Kilkenny, I'll drop in.
Oh no, come down, you have to come. Actually, today we just did a whole tourist thing for the first time, even though we're all from here. And we were down at the little market in front of the castle, and we went to the Medieval Mile Museum. It's lovely. Come, in the sunshine, it's beautiful. So.
Okay, it's a beautiful city.
It
Listen,
is.
Great to see you, Nicci. Thank you very much for taking the time, and keep safe.
Okay, you too. God bless.
Good night.